Hey everybody, John Peterson from John Peterson Photography, and in today's video I want to talk to you a little bit about the orientation of your camera. Whether you're in landscape orientation or portrait orientation, it can have a profound effect on your image, how connected it is, how the elements within the image coalesce together. And you know, I just want to get folks to start thinking about maybe moving away from landscape orientation and shooting some stuff in portrait mode. Now, you know, a lot of landscape photographers shoot in landscape mode, hence the name. You know, and landscape is the horizontal mode, you know, side to side like this. Portrait mode, of course, is when you flip it on its side by 90 degrees and shoot with the vertical orientation. Now, you know, as you're out in the field photographing landscape and nature subjects, choosing the orientation can be extremely important part of your composition. You know, we always look at our subjects, the lighting, the pattern, shapes, textures, and colors. We compose everything just right, but how often do people give a conscious thought to the right orientation of the camera for the scene that you're shooting? In a lot of my workshops, people put their camera down and they put it in the landscape mode and they never move off of that. They don't think about moving things into a portrait mode for different subjects and for telling different stories. So today I want to talk just a little bit about that, and I'll show you some examples here of why you may want to choose one or the other. Okay, so stay tuned. Let's go look at some pictures and I'll be right back with you. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some images and why you might want to choose one camera orientation of the other. The first reason is your subject, right? And what you're trying to do. This is an image of some large rope that's laying on the deck of a ferry headed to Victoria, BC. And I really wanted to accentuate the horizontal lines of this. And because I wanted horizontal lines, I shot this in a landscape mode. If I wanted to reposition myself, I could have maybe stood on top of the rope, shot in a portrait mode, and had the lines gone vertically. I had the luxury of choosing which way I wanted to go, and in this case I wanted a horizontal mode to accentuate these lines. If I would have shot from the same angle in a vertical orientation, portrait mode, I wouldn't have gotten the same effect as what I have in this image. You know, subjects like this is very much a horizontal image, so I need to shoot it in a horizontal perspective. I need that landscape perspective to include the width and the breadth, and because the orientation of the camera really mimics the orientation of my subject. Similarly, you know, waterfall, that's a very vertical subject, and I wanted the framing of the shot to really resemble and mimic a lot of the subject. You know, have a lot of the water coming into the foreground, vertical falls. Of course, I'm going to shoot this in a portrait mode. This kind of shot could have been done in both horizontal or vertical, landscape or portrait. But I really wanted this stick, the driftwood in the foreground, to have a prominent role in the image. And I wanted to include a lot of the sky. And so, you know, if I would have shot this in landscape mode, the stick and the rock would have been extremely small in the image to get the same sort of feel and breadth of what I got here in the portrait mode. And so I chose to go portrait to really accentuate some depth between the driftwood, the rock, and then the sun in the background. It really brings depth into the image. So it was a very much a conscious choice to shoot this in portrait mode. Now here's another one, right? Another coastal scene shot in landscape mode. Really get some width and some breadth of the rocks in the foreground and this kind of expansive streaky sky. But in that same session with the sky just going off, I also shot it in a portrait mode and really highlighted one of the tongues of rock. Instead of having multiples, I picked a spot where I could have one central theme that would really work with this portrait mode and drive people off into the background of the shot. So, horizontal, there's that thing, and it's the same finger of rock. Water level's a bit different, but the feel is dramatically different. Again, a vertical subject needs a vertical orientation. Fill the frame with the subject. If I would have tried to do this horizontally, I would have had a ton of trees and branches and foliage and all sorts of other stuff that wasn't central to the image. I really wanted this to be just the waterfall. Likewise, I wanted to highlight the reflection in the water and this tree that was submerged by the rising waters, and it was a very vertical scene, and so I had to move my camera into the portrait mode to capitalize on this strong vertical element that I have going on in this shot. Another coastal scene, portrait or landscape. There's the portrait. There's the landscape. Different feels. Both of them work, in my opinion. It's just a matter of personal preference. So when I'm on location like this, I will shoot both ways if there is enough interest in the sky and I've got a great foreground element. A shot like this, you would normally think this is Mount Hood from Trillium Lake, and normally you would think about shooting mountains in the landscape mode because they're wide, they have big bases, forests leading up to them. If I would have done that, I would have come off with a mountain image, which is fine. But what I really liked, which hopefully you can see in this video, is the small person on a kayak out here in the mist. And if I would have shot in a landscape mode, this person would have looked like a speck of dust in the image. And so what I did was I went vertical, I went portrait mode, zoomed in as much as I could, so the kayaker could be visible in this shot with the mountain in the background. Again, landscape or portrait. Different feels. This shot is all about the ring, and it's all about these horizontal cracks that are coming across. Portrait is less about the ring. It's still a strong element with these cracks, but it's also about this drip of calcium and whatever else they have coming off of this. So again, different feels, landscape or portrait. Likewise, vertical subject, I wanted a vertical orientation. Shot like this, I really wanted to highlight the dividing line between the rocks and the wood. I'd love the differences in texture and tonality between these two subjects, and this dividing line between the two was a central part in my head of this shot. And so I wanted to make sure that dividing line played an expansive role in the shot, and that's why I went with landscape with this particular thing. To try to make that feeling come through to the viewer. Oftentimes when I shoot trees, forest scenes, it's typically done in a vertical orientation because the subjects themselves are vertical. Trees are vertical. So I oftentimes do this portrait mode, and I happen to include a little bit of the stream. Many times I shoot streams in a landscape mode, but here, because I've got about 50-50, it was kind of a toss-up of whether to go landscape or portrait. I like portrait better because of the strong vertical lines of those trees. Even shooting close-ups and macros, you have to pay attention to whether you're shooting landscape or portrait. This is an iris flower after a brief morning shower, and because the tongue of that iris is kind of coming out towards me, I interpret this as being more vertical, and we've got the lines in the petals that are also vertical, running from bottom to top. And so I shot this in a portrait orientation. A small vignette from a forest scene. The fern is the most important part of this, and I wanted to capture as much of the fern as possible. The stream, I wanted to give a hint that the stream was there, but the fern was what's most important, and so I wanted to get as close as I could to the fern, fill as much of the frame, and still include a little bit of the stream, so landscape orientation was the way to go. You know, earlier I said I normally shoot trees in a portrait mode. Well, here's an example of when I don't do that. I liked the breadth of the trees and the spacing of the trees here, and having the fog was a central part of this image. This was up near Mount Adams in Washington, and I was driving along to a different destination, and this bank of fog rolled in, and I immediately had to stop, and I found this beautiful scene, and really wanted to make the fog an important part of this composition. And so for me, doing this in a landscape mode and really having good separation between the tree trunks lessened some of the impact or the importance of the trees and made it more about the whole scene, including the fog. Again, another close-up shot. I've got this strong chrome strip running front to back, and the best way to shoot this is in a vertical orientation to accentuate that line, to really make it a strong presence in the image. Out in the Palouse, I've got a horizontal cloud bank, and I've got these horizontal lines on the top of the hills running side to side. That just screams for a landscape orientation. You know, I said oftentimes shoot mountains in a landscape mode, and here's an example of that. This is in Ballhead, Norway. And we had a beautiful sunrise. I was leading a workshop out there, had this gorgeous sunrise in the harbor with just crystal clear water. And this color and this light lasted for about 20 minutes, so it allowed all of us a chance to experiment and try different compositions. And of course, I had to do both landscape and then portrait. Different feel. This one's more expansive, more inclusive. This one's a little bit more intimate. They tell different stories, in my opinion. So, you know, both of them work. It's just which one do you like better? But it was a conscious choice for me to shoot both. Likewise, there's another shot from Norway. This mountain stream is typically frozen, but we hit it just right where it was flowing with these mountains in the background. And so I shot it horizontally and I shot it vertically. Tells a different story. Horizontal, again, expansive, shows you more of the landscape feel of where we're at. This tells a tighter, more intimate story of the landscape. Again, kicking on with Norway, right? Here's another one from the coast over by Udacliff. And this particular one, again, a seascape. Oftentimes I shoot these horizontally, but I also decided to shoot it vertically because this shelf in this rock, it was so amazing, and it was creating all these cool water motion effects that worked great vertically like this or horizontally like this. So it worked both ways. Vertical subject, vertical orientation of the camera. Trees with fog. Here's another example of this. This one I chose to shoot vertically, partly because the left and right of this image wasn't too photogenic, but it also wasn't too bright up above, so I can include more of the upper canopy with that fog in the background, so it worked really well. Another seascape in the vertical orientation, really accentuating this crack. It's a central element of this shot. In fact, it is kind of the whole shot here, versus going horizontal, and it's more about a broader landscape story, less about the cracks. You see the cracks are cool, but the cracks aren't as strong as a shot like this. This was another one that could have gone either way. It could have gone horizontal or vertical. I chose to do vertical because I love the color graduations from the sky down towards the hills. And if I would have shot this in landscape mode and gotten wide enough to get those graduations, I would have gotten a lot of other hills and other elements and shapes in this shot, and I really wanted to highlight just these central hills and the way they overlap. So to narrow my focus just on that part of the landscape and include that much of the sky, I had to go vertical. Another forest shot, again, trees. This is again up by in the Mount Adams area. Done it horizontally, done it vertically. Different stories are here. This tells more about the landscape. This is more about the trees. So there's a few images that I hope gets you thinking about shooting horizontal or vertically. I hope you give a conscious thought as you're composing your shot in the field. What would be better? What orientation? All right, so there you have it. There's a few examples of why you might choose portrait mode over landscape mode. Now here's a caveat for a lot of folks out there. A lot of tripods make it really difficult to flip into portrait mode from landscape mode. If you look at a lot of the ball heads, there's little notches on them, and you have to drop the plate down and drop the camera down and rotate it, and it's really a hassle for a lot of people. And the other thing too is when you set up a tripod and you have it in landscape mode, you have everything framed up and aligned just right. When you flip the camera down in the ball head and rotate it to a portrait mode, you have to basically reposition the tripod, because now you've moved everything and changed maybe the relationship of elements in the scene. And so it makes it really difficult and frustrating for a lot of people to flip back and forth between landscape and portrait modes. Let me give you the pro tip, and the one thing that I have on every single camera that I own is an L bracket. And just like the Arca Swiss plates that most of us have on the bottom of our cameras, an L bracket extends up the side of the camera and also has an Arca Swiss adaptable or fittable plate on the side. So I can be like this, and then without repositioning my tripod, I unleash it, rotate the camera, clamp everything back down, the tripod hasn't moved, and I'm in a new orientation. You can buy L plates that are custom fit to each camera, like this particular one from RRS, or you can buy generic L plates like I have here on my GFX that will do the job. They may not be perfectly sculpted and they may not allow easy access to all the battery compartments, but it gets the job done. This RRS L plate was about 180 bucks when I bought it. This generic one was about 30 bucks when I bought it. The only problem on the GFX camera is I have to loosen the L bracket to change the batteries, but it's a small price to pay for $150 of savings. So I put L brackets on every single camera I own. It's the first accessory I buy when I get a new camera. Again, you go from landscape to portrait, portrait to landscape, just with opening and closing the tripod clamp. Very simple and very easy. All right, folks, so stay tuned, and I'll be putting out more videos as time goes on, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.